And let's see if my stream is picking up. Yep, looks like I'm live. So welcome to a rather late Saturday night stream. It's now 8:30. I'm just getting ready to settle up. Okay, click on that. Yep. Hello, cats. How you doing? Just doing a quick audio check before I set off. Enjoying life at the restaurant, I take it? Oh, very nice. That looks like I've got my audio level set up, so that's pretty good. I'll just turn my watch up so I can actually hear my truck rumble. I'm in the Dream Cab today, so it's single player. Registered on the south coast of the UK. And, yep, Techie is in the cab today. We got Techie the cat. Right, so let's see where I am, because I'm in Cardiff at the moment, Sunset Wheels. Let's see what we've got. I'll do as a nice bit of work for the next couple of hours. Plymouth, Urbid, down in Jordan. Yeah, it's probably a bit too far. Zaragoza in southern Spain. Let's go for route length. Cardiff, Birmingham, Plymouth, Brest. Valencia's Galway, Duisburg. Corona, ACC. That's not the farm though. Okay. Duisburg. Again, that's over there. A little bit too short. RT Logistics in Zaragoza. Just seen that one. Helsinki in Finland. That's quite easy to get to. Just drive to bloody Travelmund to take the bloody boat. Yeah. You should try skinning a truck like the Falkland skin, which I was in that last week because 40 years ago, at the moment, in 1982, we had the Falklands conflict rumbling away. Could go that way, I think. Yeah, why not? Let's go to Stokes. Ooh, pardon me. Right, there's my trailer. So just put that on that side there, put that over there. That's there. Right, okay. So yeah, does he? Why not? You know, we always have to staff. Yeah, always keep your eye on the website for any potential recruitment. He's so used to the horn, he just ignores it now. Sleeps through it. I'll put the radio back up as well. Hopefully this time he won't black the microphone and I'll have the microphone land on him. What's this dangly thing? Wow! He wasn't happy about that. Right, okay, so. And we've had some information come through about 144. Now, I don't know if it's going to really be a mod breaking, but we're getting a new feature. I say keep your eyes involved if you see the application that you think you can do. Yeah. Well, when I was just a player, there was somebody called Ripsose, and he's on the Facebook forum. And he puts my name up for game admin. I'm like, oh my Jesus Christ. Yeah, it's a huge public forum like it. It's like, it's like, I'm like, that'll be the day. But I applied for it anyway, because obviously I'm a professional driver. I was like, I got the job. You know, we don't go out of our way to ban people. We're not there to swing the ban hammer. We're there to coach people. But for some people like you, the coaching worked. You're all right. You know, if you actually learn, you know, if players like do what you did and learn from your mistakes, it'll be a better place. Apparently it's there, so I ain't gonna do a blind side. Fuck that. Let's do a sighted lineup. I've not seen that. I know we're getting buses coming through. Personally, I think it's a better idea than the bloody scout car. You know, I hate that thing. The scout car's like a fucking tank. it's also probably one of the most abused vehicles in the game as well, these scout carriers. Well, yeah, that's just my personal opinion. I'm not a fan of it. But people are, so they asked for it, so we kind of give it them. Right, let's see what I've got. K-line. Kyushu line. I think it is. K-line was, I think they're now part of ONE. We are going as well with this container up to Stavanger in Norway. So it'll be a nice steady drive up through, well, across to Felixstowe, then to Esbjerg, then up, or I can go whichever way I've got to go. I've got to go to it's something I'll have to have a look at. I know that if you're in part of the real ops team, you get all the vehicles, but they only ever seem to come out of real ops. I mean, to be honest, I mean, if I could have any vehicle, you know, take the scout car away, but give any other vehicle in its place, I think I'd give the pilot van. Right. So that's that out of the way. That's me. Cup of coffee drunk. So put that there. No cookies. Baggy. There we are, green cap. This is it. A simple skin. There you go. When it comes to that road, there's more to TMP than the CD road. I think players just constantly pounding that road causes half the bloody problems. Yeah, you got all that roads to play with. You know, and some roads on the map are much better than the CD road. Certainly nicer looking. Thank you. Well, don't get me wrong, the CD road is a nice road along the French coast, but players treat it like a bloody racetrack, and that's what ruins it. And it ruins it not just for themselves, but for everybody else around. You know, you got all this road to play with, so use it. I saw you. You don't. Thanks. It's a Z-mod sound, Paymod. This is not the best bit. This is. got some power as well. Oh yeah, what's happened there? And with this particular soundboard, I can have between about 525 horses and 1,000. This has got 1,000 horsepower in, so it's a little lively. But that said, it cruises nicely. Yeah, the new feature that we're getting is going to be adjustable air suspension. Yeah, so you come down, you've got your trailer, it's like a little bit awkward ground, you can't quite get to it, or you've got the 80 profile Michelin tyre, so you can't quite hitch up to it. Pull up to the trailer, dump the air suspension down. Down it comes. Back under your trailer till your fifth wheel just disappears. Raise the air suspension up till your legs just clear the floor. Continue to back under. Clunk. Try to pull forwards. Once. Twice. Handbrake on. Connect the airlines. Reset the air suspension. Off you go. Just like in real life, that's how you couple up a truck. Sit back and cruise along now. Put the headlights on as well, does help. It's going to get dark shortly. No, it's 6:40, 6:50, so it's getting light. So our plan is basically on this, we go down towards the M25. We'll go around the top of the 25. Might go down the underside of 25, I don't know yet. Go around the 25. Pick up the road to Felixstowe. Down towards Harwich. Over to Esbjerg. Then over to Stavanger. I would put some, because obviously the Falklands are on, 40 years ago. If only I got like the speeches of Maggie Thatcher about the Falklands, that'd be quite apt to play right now, which probably be copyrighted. But also as well in April 1986, coming forwards about 4 years in the Ukraine. Yeah, the Ukraine. Because when what I'm about to tell you happened, Ukraine was not independent, it was still part of the Soviet Union. April 26th, so it's a few days away right now to the anniversary thereof. About o'clock in the morning local time, when the power grid on Ukraine was not under a great deal of demand, which was ideal for him to do it at the time that he did. Power station in northern Ukraine, near Belarusia, White Russia. There's obviously this power station. It's also near the town of Pripyat, which right now is featuring quite heavily in the news over in Ukraine right now. There was a test to be carried out to see how long they could run the turbo generators for after steam was cut to the turbines before auxiliary diesel plants kicked in. And they've been trying to do this test. Things hadn't quite gone to plan. The reactor itself had gone to really low power. It was in it was in like the danger area. It was sluggish because it was producing xenon gas, and xenon gas is a nuclear poison. It's a neutron absorber. So they pulled out most of the control rods in a bid to get this thing going. And it started to behave strangely. But they got the power restored line. Now the time was to disengage all the safety systems. Click, 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 click. Pulled out all but 4 rods as well. And this thing, reactor started to misbehave itself. Boil water inside. Because what had happened is water circulation had stopped. If I recall. We got on top of this reactor concrete blocks which sat on top of the power caps, and they basically kept the actual radiation fuel rods coming out. Well, so you have to move these rods out, caps out of the way to get into there with the fueling machine. So obviously take the old fuel rods out, put the new fuel rods in, put the cap back on. Well, during this test, obviously they were carrying it out. The control rods were tipped. Graphite. Boron control rods had the graphite tip for some strange reason. And the power void of this reactor, when it started to generate steam, it would generate more power. More power led to more steam. More steam led to more power. Because water is a great moderator for nuclear reactors. And when you've got plenty of steam, you had some serious issues in that reactor. Because it was a boiling water reactor. And unfortunately, at about 2:30 in the morning, I mean, I'm not totally certain on the time, the test went absolutely tits up. Started to generate that much bloody steam and pressure inside. There was an almighty explosion inside the reactor. Well, that was a couple of the fuel channels going pop. So then I'm not sure if that was before or after they hit the AZ5 button. Well, when they hit the AZ5 button to put all the rods in the reactor, all the control rods, shit really hit the fan. There was an enormous power surge inside that reactor and it just exploded. On top of the reactor there was a lid. This lid weighed about 3,000 tons. It was several meters thick of reinforced concrete. It was hurled through the roof. A few hundred feet in the air, flipped over a couple of times. You know, if you put like a coin on top of your thumb, like on the clenched fist, and you flick it, you know, you do like a heads or tails. Well, that's what this reactor lid did. Went up, somersaulted a couple of times, and came back down on top of the reactor. Now, 3,000 tons of concrete and metal coming down. Something's got to move out the way. And so it did move out the way. It basically pushed the reactor down a couple of floors. Well, the bottom half didn't move, but the top bit certainly did. And as a result, it cracked the base of the reactor. And all the nuclear fuel that had started to melt has basically run down to various parts of the power station. Well, this then caused a bit of problem for Mikhail Gorbachev, premier of the Soviet Union. He was the last president of the Soviet Union. Well, I think it was Afghanistan that completely brought him down. This fire, like I say, was a graphite fire. Graphite is basically carbon, and it was burning for a couple of days. I mean, they ended up pouring bloody boron and boric acid and sand, anything that they could think of to work as a neutron absorber to completely smother the reactor. Well, after about a week, they actually finally did get the fire out. And over time, the radiations obviously is washed down into the ground. Well, fast forward several years to like this year. One of the first places that the Russians conscripts go to get into Ukraine, to try and get to Kyiv, they come on the Belarusian border and they come through Chernobyl. And they've also dug trenches. Now, if you've ever helped dug any digging in the garden, or helped your parents in gardening and stuff like that, cats, your hands get grubby, dirty. Well, if you're digging a trench, your hands are going to get dirty, and unfortunately this dirt is radioactive. So all these conscripts have been digging trenches, have had to go back to Belarus with severe radiation poisoning. I feel sorry for them, because that is not a nice way to go. Especially with the fact that, as they're conscripts, they're not your volunteer soldiers. They don't want to be particularly there, you know, fighting Vladimir's bloody conquest. So you've got to feel sorry for the conscripts. it's not all Russian soldiers who are carrying out the atrocities. I wouldn't be surprised if the ones carrying out the atrocities that part of Putin's Wagner group, but that's a totally separate issue. Because these soldiers in Russia right now and in the Pripyat area, they have contaminated themselves on the inside. Now, the skin is very good at keeping alpha and beta particles out of you. You can go to a place. You can actually, if you're a nuclear fuel worker at the power station, you can pick up the nuclear fuel, the uranium-235. You can physically handle it with your bare hands, with no ill effects, so long as you wash your hands afterwards. Because once you get the alpha and beta particles inside of you, that's when you start to do the damage. Which is what's happened to these troops right now. I mean, they've eaten bloody contaminated food because you put it down on the ground or what have you. They've used groundwater to wash dishes and stuff like that, when that area is highly radioactive. Made water probably local contaminated water supply. So as a result, they've not done themselves any favours. But going back to 1986, it was April 26th, early hours of the morning. Well, on the April, I think it was the 28th, an order was issued to evacuate Pripyat. Take one bag of suitcase with you, and you'll be coming back in a couple of days. Don't take any pets, just take the bare essentials of what you're going to need for a couple of nights away. So most of them did, and you're sent off with I think got the wrong one. And you were sent off to other places in Russia to get away from the nuclear area, and you never came back. Pripyat is a ghost town. And it will actually remain a ghost town for the next few hundred years. Unfortunately, the reactors 1, 2 and 3, I mean, they continued to run. In fact, on the night of the explosion, those reactors were functioning, as far as I'm aware, completely normally. Just imagine what the panic would be, just a few hundred yards away from Control Room 3, as all hell was breaking loose in Control Room 4. Somewhere over there, there's actually a graveyard of machinery. There's all the equipment that was used to fight the fire. He couldn't use again. Couldn't use it. It was just too highly contaminated. So just sitting there in a field, just rotting away. obviously to deal with the fire, one of the things that they did was they had to send the machines up, you know, remote control machines, to push all the debris back inside the chamber of the wrecked reactor number 4. The thing is, all this radiation that was coming out, it was just frying all the circuitry. Some machines would just like put them on the roof and that was it. It just went haywire. It was like suicide dive into the edge, or just simply just stop working. So the Russians had only one option left, and that was to call upon willing volunteers. You can either do a year tour of duty in Afghanistan, because at the time there was Russia was fighting the Mujahideen in Afghanistan and losing badly, or you can spend 3 minutes on the roof of a nuclear reactor and become a hero of the Soviet Union. Well, some people like 3 minutes. Do it. They paid the price. But they literally had to go up, fashion themselves out of lead, some shielding. Yes, literally, they would have to wear lead armor to try and reduce the radiation. The only thing is, they couldn't really go as far as having lead underpants, because obviously it would restrict your movement too much. And most of the lead that they did, yeah, it would stop radiation coming out from the front. However, it didn't stop the gamma rays coming out from underneath. So, although their stomach was protected from direct radiation, the lower groin and lower extremities were not, and that's where the radiation got in and did most of its damage to these people. 3 minutes, that's all they were allowed. In fact, I don't even think it was that long. It was literally go up on the roof, 3 scoops of shovels of debris into the reactor chamber, back down, out. That's it, you're done. And they had several thousand of these people. They call them liquidators or bio-robots. There's not many of them left alive. Cancer, leukemias and likes, basically took them very, very slow, very painful death. Welcome to France. Time me to drive on the right side of the road. I'm already on the right hand side of the road. They could have actually designed this a little bit better, actually. But this Chernobyl was not the only incident to affect the RBMK. They nearly had another 2 other explosions. One of which was just before it, there's a place called Ignalia Power. I think it was pronounced it Ignalia Power Station or Ignalia. Not too far away from Leningrad at the time, and it was a very similar incident. To the curb there. Well, after Chernobyl, they had to shut down all the RBMK reactors to carry out major safety checks and upgrades, because nobody told the plant operators about this design flaw. It was flawless as Soviet technology. There's nothing wrong with the RBMK, which is fine, perfectly. Was it? Well, if that was the case, I mean, it's could have been used elsewhere even up to this date. But that's one of the reasons why when we built our nuclear fleet, we used gas-cooled reactors. Which are far safer than the boiling water reactors. In fact, the main reactor at the time was the Magnox. All the Magnox plants have now shut down. The last one to shut down was Wilfer, and that was about 4 or 5 years ago now, I think. It ran out, basically it used all of its fuel up. And we'd also as well got the AGR, the Advanced Gas Cooled Reactor, which I've actually been to Haitian Power Station, and it is one hell of an interesting tour. Although those reactors now are starting to come to the end of their service life. Hunterston B has been taken off grid to begin the process of cool down and defueling and decommissioning. Hunterston A is a Magnox plant that's been shut down a while now. And those reactors, again, they were graphite moderated, gas cooled. Which meant they needed a far bigger footprint compared to the high power channel type reactor, whose acronym in Russian is RBMK. Unfortunately, my Russian is less than useful, so I can't actually tell you what it actually means in Russian. Well, the English translation is high power channel type reactor, because your fuel went down various channels. And it was one of the fuel channels that initially exploded that caused the cascade. Well, since the RBMK exploded at Chernobyl, production and construction of units 5 and 6 was stopped with immediate effect. Partly because a crane that was used to hoist stuff up into the building, when the buildings, it is now highly radioactive and highly contaminated. Well, you can't exactly work in a contaminated environment like that, because you will very quickly get irradiated. Because although your body is good at keeping alpha and beta particles out, it doesn't do well with the gamma particles. And the gamma particles have got some power, and basically they just start punching holes into your body cells at a very cellular level. And that's what kills you. mean, obviously later on the units 1, 2 and 3 were shut down in the late 1990s. This is after Ukraine had got its independence. That is how they needed all this nuclear power, because they ain't got much in the way of power availability left. And the RBMK is unlike a few other pressurized water reactors. Because a PWR, to refuel the damn thing, you have to shut it down and then open up the pressure vessel to refuel it. So you can't have any breaches in the pressure vessel. The RBMKs, like the Magnox and the AGR, and there's also a Canadian type called the Can-Do, which is, I think it uses depleted uranium for that, or is it deuterium uranium, I think it is. They can I think the Can-Do as well is horizontally channeled, so they have to shut that down for refueling. But the AGR, the Magnox and the RBMK, you could do on-load refueling. You didn't have to shut them down to refuel, which is great for an operator. It cuts your running costs down when you can refuel the damn thing on load. With a pressurized water reactor, and to some degree most Westinghouse boiling water designs, again like the PWRs, you have to shut them down to refuel. And when the reactor is shut down, it's not making any money. Business of generating electricity, you want your reactors running as much as you can. Because, the more power you can put into the grid, the more profit you're going to make. And Chernobyl as well helped to kind of it put fear of God up into some people, particularly the Green lobby. It's helped to secure their, in my opinion, misguided belief that nuclear power is dangerous. It isn't. No more dangerous than coal or natural gas or hydroelectric. Because generally speaking, the low-level nuclear waste decays very quick. But the high-level stuff, it takes a long time to decay. There's not very much of that. And your coal-fired power station, all the stuff that they put out, the sulfur dioxides, the nitrogen dioxides, and carbon dioxide, all goes and all have major health effects. Well, nobody was concerned about that with all these massive coal-fired power stations that we produced. power that Chernobyl and even Haitian, for example, put out. The amount of coal you'll burn in a year, it's astronomical. Thousands of tons of freight train every day. You know, 20, 30 wagon loads of coal every day for the entire life of the power station. That's a lot of coal. You know, when you got like 3,000-4,000 tons of coal per train. But when you've got a nuclear power plant, it uses a few tens of tons of uranium-235 a year. You just do the math, the amount of power that it puts out. You don't need a lot of material to generate that power. You just need to be able to keep the dangerous stuff inside it. And they're very good at doing that. I mean, just look at 3 Mile Island. They had a steam leak, a radioactive steam leak. There was no leak of radiation. The containment structure kept it all inside. It did its job. Part of the problem with the RBMK, there was no containment structure around the reactor, which is what caused a lot of the problems. You know, they had a biological shield, but that's about it. That would keep the radiation out on the, well, keep the radiation in, sorry, under normal operating conditions, but it wouldn't do much else when things went tits up. And now obviously with this current crisis, where we are currently putting sanctions on Russia, but at the same time we are dependent on a lot of natural gas for our power supply. Not UK, but certainly Europe. Is that certain countries like Germany, they shut their nuclear power stations down after Fukushima, which meant they needed to get energy somewhere else. And you got Russia has a lot of oil, and they have a lot of natural gas. A hell of a lot of the stuff. Yeah. To the point where they can rival the Middle East. So it's a lot of gas, a lot of oil that they can bring in and sell cheap to the West. And we bought it. But now we need to find a new source of that for energy. And that is making nuclear now look really potentially quite promising again. The only thing is, it takes about 10 years to build a nuclear power station. 5 to 10 years to build it. Testing, commissioning, and then it will run for about 40 to 50 years. And then obviously you've got the decommissioning costs after that. And you reckon it'll probably take about 50 to 60 years to decommission our Magnox reactors. Well, the partly due to that is they are a dry core reactor, whereas a PWR and a boiling water reactor, BWR, Bravo Whiskey Romeo. Papa Whiskey Romeo, a pressurised water reactor. They're obviously they're a wet design. They'll probably take a little bit less time to decommission because water is very good at working as a neutron shield. It's very good at doing that. So good, in fact, that you can stand on the edge of a spent fuel pool, look over inside it, but wearing little more than jeans and a jumper, and you will not receive a dose of radiation higher than background. In fact, if you are working in the nuclear industry, you occasionally have to carry out maintenance on the nuclear fuel pool. How do you do it? Scuba diving. I kid you not. That is how good the shielding properties are for nuclear fuel ponds when they're fully enclosed with water. But there's a test reactor somewhere, I think, in the United States, where they're looking at various different things and they power this thing up. But before they power it up, they put a GoPro on a selfie stick and lower it in the water. And they turn this reactor on and it glows quite brightly, bright blue, but the camera receives no radiation whatsoever. And the Green Lobby, I mean, they're frightened of this stuff. Nuclear fuel in the 1950s and 1960s was seen as nuclear power was the way to go. You ever watching Thunderbirds? And you're cooking something and let's use the atomic oven. Nowadays we all have, nearly every house has an atomic oven. Although how it produces its power is not through splitting of nuclear atoms, but it does actually, how it cooks, it does actually involve nuclear atoms, but it doesn't split them. It just excites them, gets them to vibrate a bit, and that's your microwave oven, which was developed from radar, believe it or not. radar technology. The military had a lot to do with the development of the microwave oven. In fact, I think it was one guy was working on it in the 40s or 50s. Might have put his hand in the middle of the coil. I don't know what he was doing. He noticed it felt warm. And this was obviously noted and tests were carried out. Yeah, you could cook things with this thing. That was kind of kept quiet, and later on somebody thought about the bright idea, well, let's release this in public. Lo and behold, we've all got microwave ovens now. But at about the same time as that, we also had the Atoms for Peace idea. And what a better thing to do than to show off nuclear power than to build a ship out of it, you know, around it. And you got the freighters of the day were all either coal-fired or oil-fired. Usually dirty, soot covered on the back. Even the ocean liners at the time. And there's this gleaming white edifice called the Savannah. The trouble is with the Savannah is that it had a lot of politics involved. To get into a port, say for example Bremerhaven, they'd have to negotiate it years in advance to allow this port to come in, because what would happen if things were to go wrong? Nobody really knew how to deal with a nuclear power station on water. But the other thing that brought down the NS Savannah was, if you want a ship to be successful, you want it to either be an excellent all-cargo ship, containers or what have you, or you want it to be all-passenger. Savannah was both, carrying both passengers and freight, which meant all the stuff needed for freight was taken up by passengers, and all the stuff needed by passengers, well, was taken up by freight. So it was not really well optimised. Anyway, I'm going to park here for a second while I go for a bio break, and I'll be back in a minute. I'm back. I got people see me parked up and they come in. Like, what's going on? Well, you don't hang around long enough to see if I'm going to be coming back. Well, of course I'm going to be coming back. Right. As I was saying earlier, a moment ago, about nuclear power. With the NS Savannah. I mean, this was also about the same time that we were deep into the Cold War. And one of the thoughts that the Americans had, and also the Russians, is how to give an aircraft in really long range. Like infinite range, where you don't so much measure your flight time in hours, you measure it in months. You know, how on earth can you make a plane fly in the air for several months at a time? And okay, you can take the idea of solar panels and batteries. Nowadays, there was an aircraft built by NASA. It was unmanned high altitude weather aircraft. It was called Pathfinder, and it was basically just a wing with several electric engines on it. And the roof was covered in solar panels, and the inside was covered with lithium-ion batteries. Well, that's all well and good for an aircraft that weighs about as much as a microwave. Well, not as it, but about as much as a small car, and has got the wingspan almost as big as a B-52. It ain't very good at something that weighs several hundred tons, such as a B-52. But you want this aircraft to have unlimited range. So the idea was, by the Americans, to, well, what would happen if we were to put a nuclear reactor on a plane? And it sounds really weird, or even sci-fi now, but it actually happened. You had an aircraft that was called the Bravo 36, the Peacemaker, built by Convoy. It was a piston-engined intercontinental bomber with a pair of booster jets on each wing. But what they did, they took the bomb bay rack out of the aircraft, sealed up the bomb bay, and they put in a nuclear reactor with all the shielding and stuff, powered it up, and this became the NB, the November Bravo 36, or Nuclear Bomber 36. And that was built to test the feasibility of a reactor in an aeroplane. Well, all it really was there just to see if a plane can take off with the relative shielding that is needed to keep the crew safe. The Russians tried it, but they just didn't use any shielding. Similar sort of effect, but it irradiated the crew. Never a good idea. Although the actual aircraft itself, the B-36, was still, for all intents and purposes, a conventional aeroplane. Just like in the bomb bay, it had a nuclear reactor, just carried aloft. Didn't do anything, just generated heat and circulated water. But it proved it was theoretically possible, then physically possible. But then came the idea of in-flight refueling, and it kind of made the aircraft obsolete at the stroke of a pen. When somebody had the bright idea of flying in close formation with another aeroplane and taking its gas off board, because you can make the aircraft lighter. Well, you make an aircraft lighter, you can carry more payload. For the military, this payload was thermonuclear weapons. Means that you can carry a couple of additional bombs to take to your enemy. In this case, Russia, because it was built by the Americans in the Cold War. And the Russians were doing a similar sort of thing as well. Although I can't quite recall what the Russian aircraft was called. But in-flight refueling kind of rendered the nuclear bomber obsolete very, very quickly. But it did prove that you could carry aloft a functioning nuclear reactor. Although how much power you probably get out of an electric motor the size of a nacelle on a B-36 is kind of questionable. However, the aircraft will be bloody quiet. I'm not sure quite what happened to the November Bravo 36. Not sure if they scrapped it or it's at the Smithsonian or National bloody Aerospace Museum in America. I'm not actually sure what happened to it. There are even ideas in the 1950s and 1960s of nuclear-powered passenger trains. Again, not really feasible. Not when you can string up miles and miles and miles of cable above the railway lines. Make a locomotive lighter and faster. I mean, heaven forbid if you had a bloody crash with a nuclear powered train, you want to make sure that your reactor does not get punctured, because that could certainly take out your rail corridor. But going back to nuclear industry, kind of gone full circle here, quite literally. There was obviously the ability to take the fuel out of the reactor. You got to put it somewhere, because you might need to reprocess it. Because at the time we were using the Magnox and the HR, and they required heavy reprocessing. Well, you have to get it from your power station, Dungeness, Hunterston, Heysham. Magnox, Wilf, Magnox, Albury, Barclay, Wilbur, Bradwell. Again, Dungeness. Up to Sellafield. And there was a fear, well, what would happen if a train hit a nuclear flask? Will it, how safe are these things? Well, BNFR also wanted to find out. Well, take a nuclear flask, put it on a rail car, put the rail car on its side. At old Dolby test track. Inside it was filled full of water with monitoring equipment. Well, what would happen if a train would hit it? Well, let's find out, shall we? And they had a locomotive as a peak class locomotive. I'm not sure if it was a 44 or 45. Might have been a 46, but it was that family of locomotive. And God, behind it was like 4 or 5 Mark 1 coaches. they chose this particular locomotive because it was about to be withdrawn from service and it was getting old, it was getting tired. Well, let's send it off with a bang. Literally. Because normally you take a locomotive out of service and they scrap it. Well, this particular one, the old Derby test track, was wired up, modified so that the throttle was on the side of the locomotive. The guy just gets out, puts the lever forward, and just walks away from the locomotive. And this thing then began to gather speed. Gets up to about 110 miles per hour. Comes round this bloody curve and hits this nuclear flask. Makes a bit of a mess of the locomotive. The nuclear flask, on the other hand, well, it's on display at Haitian Power Station. Damage? A bent cooling fin. That's it. Not the outer casing lid off, but the inside of the flask that he used to transport the nuclear fuel was completely undamaged. And it's just sat there on display at Haitian Power Station. You can go up and have a look at it. And if you hadn't seen the video, you wouldn't have known the locomotive actually hit this thing. Very safe. I've got no trouble with living next door to a nuclear power station if you were to build one in the city where I live. In fact, if somebody were to basically, yeah, we're going to put a nuclear power station in Burton-on-Trent, it's not too far away from where I live. Yeah, do it. Do it. Oh, we want to put a nuclear power station in Manchester. Go right ahead. You know, a small modular reactor being made at Rolls-Royce is a viable power source. Completely viable idea. I mean, you know, if you want as well a gas supply for domestic heating, yeah, frack it. I personally am not against fracking. I'm not against nuclear. And in this days of climate crisis, bringing your gas and oil from unstable, geopolitically unstable parts of the world does not make sense. You can reformulate gas into diesel fuel. Yeah, so why risk bringing it halfway around the world in a tanker? I remember the Exxon Valdez. Some older people might remember the people who are older than me might remember the Torrey Canyon. They were both tankers. I also remember the Brea. In fact, people who were young enough to remember Maggie Thatcher being in power will certainly remember Ah, thanks. We'll certainly remember the Brea off Shetland Islands. Now, if you're going to bring in your oil and your natural gas, surely it'd be better for it to come straight out of the pipeline and come into the network. You're not having to ship it halfway around the world. So you're not having to burn huge amounts of the stuff just to move it from A to B. And until we can find a way of making hydrogen cheap and plentiful, we are going to be stuck with natural gas and oil. And hydrogen, I think, is going to be, the combustible fuel of the future. There's already talk about trying it in aeroplanes. After all, it'll burn. You can just run into a gas turbine quite easily. Run kerosene in an engine, so you can run hydrogen in an engine. The engine won't know any difference, effectively. My Toyota Corolla, replace the petrol tank inside that with a hydrogen cylinder under the floor. It'll run quite happily. Probably the range won't be as great, but it'll run. So that is potentially one source of fuel. And hydrogen, we can either electrolyse it out of seawater, or you can pull it off methane gas. Because methane gas is a hydrocarbon. Hydrogen and carbon. So there's your energy source. These guys go. That's it. I'm coming out. Out of the way. Out of the way. Coming through. And to have the idea of stringing electrical cables above the motorways, that's fine until someone crashes and brings it down, because then every vehicle that is dependent on these things will come to a screeching halt, because the power supply has just been taken out by a road accident kilometres upstream or kilometres downstream. So the E-highway in that respect, probably not totally feasible. For a car you've got batteries. Well, yeah, okay. It'll take about an hour, 2 hours to charge them up from cold, from empty. But for a truck, you need something that's a little bit quicker to refuel. So for that, hydrogen is going to be your ideal fuel. The only thing is the government is banning into petrol and diesel engines. The press have got a wind of that. Said, oh, they're banning internal combustion engines. No, they're just banning petrol and diesel. And that's in about 5 years' time, I think it is, 2030. But you've got these over in the UK plans to build HS2, high speed 2, and there's a lot of protests about it. Chopping down trees for this, chopping down trees for that, what have you. And step back and think about it. You need to move freight from point A to point B. And I've got a T-shirt, and on the front of this T-shirt it says, "Without trucks, you'll be homeless, hungry, and naked, because you will have no clothes, no food, no house." Because the bricks that you use to build your house were delivered to the building site on a truck. The food that you put in your freezer, and indeed the freezer itself, was brought to your house on a truck. The clothes that you wear were taken from the garment factory to the port that it was shipped over to the UK, and then from the UK, from the port to the garment sales place, it was taken on a truck. So the truck is vital for the modern economy, no matter where you are in the world. I'll go this way. Actually, on the other way. Bugger! The railway network in the UK, as it stands right now, is crowded. We haven't got space for long container trains. We have not got the space. So what do? Well, you need then to build a line, a high-speed line, to take all that passenger stuff, the long-distance passenger stuff, off. And that will then give you capacity to take trucks like this off the rails, or off the road, and put it on the rails. Because you can't do that if you've not got the space on the main line. And these, your typical modern day truck, it burns diesel fuel. Well, your freight train can be electric, powered by electricity generated by nuclear, by hydro, by wind, offshore or onshore. And your high-speed train, well, that'll cut your emissions down several-fold. Cut your emissions down by a greater amount than the trees that you're chopping down will take in. So you'll still have a reduction in your carbon output. And that's the thing about high-speed rail. You can go to a sensitive area, put a tunnel through it, go underground. Yeah, there's people who don't want high speed too, but they want high speed internet. Well, high speed internet still uses power. They still want to go bird watching, and what do they go to their bird watching with? Hey, they go in a Land Rover, they go in a car. That typically isn't a Tesla, typically isn't a Nissan Leaf, Renault Zoe, Ioniq EV. It's typically a family car or a 4x4 which burns petrol or diesel. Whatever you need to do, you're still going to need to burn something to generate power. So you may as well burn it at a safe location, i.e. a power station, and use that to move your goods about. And if I want to go to London or Manchester, take the train. And if HS2 gets me to Leeds or Manchester or London quicker than conventional rail, all well and good. It's more time for me to spend at my end destination. Because typically for me to, if I want to go to Aberdeen now, take about 12 hours. Well, if you were to build a HS2 network up to Edinburgh, I could shorten that journey time to by 4 hours, quite easy. Yeah, so HS2, build the bloody thing. Then take your long haul, relatively slow trains off the line, free up space for freight trains. I mean, yeah, there will still be a need for trucks like this to do the final stop, from the container port to the warehouse. But then you're rather than travelling up and down the M6 for God knows how long, or the M1 or wherever, it's just a short journey. Makes sense. Where's he going? Where's he going? Stay over there, Renault. So scanning. Stay over there. But let me through. Coming through. And where does that leave passenger aviation? Obviously, you can't stick a nuclear reactor inside a 747. Kind of no room for the passengers. Planes do have a habit of crashing, so there is a fear of nobody will want a nuclear powered aircraft flying overhead. So you can use hydrogen for that. But back in the 1930s, if you wanted to go somewhere, you could do it in style on a cruise liner, which would take you about 7 days. Or you can cut the journey time down significantly and do it in real style in a Zeppelin. Now a Zeppelin, big airship, filled with hydrogen gas at the time. The American ones were filled with helium, but the German ones were filled with hydrogen. And they were as long as a cruise liner, powered by 4 or 6 propeller engines hanging off the side of the frame. And you could go across in style. Now the Hindenburg famously caught fire. Well, you got all that space, and battery technology nowadays is pretty bloody good. So you have lithium-ion batteries or another high energy density power source batteries on the inside, and you can put solar panels on the outside. Now remember that Pathfinder aircraft by NASA? It was unmanned, had the wingspan probably something like that of a B-52. It was solar powered, and it was battery powered. Solar powers during the day, charges the batteries, runs at night on its internal battery power. Daytime, sun comes up, it switches back to solar power, charges the batteries, and there we go. With an airship, there's no reason why you couldn't put solar panels on the outside of the airbag, on the gas bag. Replace your petrol engines on the side of the aircraft with electric motors, batteries on the inside. It sits at the mooring mast, charges up, passengers board, up it goes, takes off, crosses the North Atlantic silently at a relatively low altitude as well, so you can get to see what's going on. You can do it pretty quick. I mean, the Hindenburg wasn't fast by today's standards, but it certainly wasn't slow. It was noisy, I'll grant you. So you've got the feasibility then to have an aircraft with infinite range. You know, you'll get to New York, you tie up to the landing mooring mast, passengers get out, get onto the Amtrak Acela or the hired car or whatever they want to go to, and off to go to their onward destination. A short time later they come back to New York, get on board the airship, come back to the UK or wherever. And you can do that and just enjoy cruising. And that would be, you know, that I think will likely for those people who want to be there quicker, can certainly take up. If you want to enjoy your holiday, make your journey as part of the holiday, yeah, go on the cruise ship. And going back to the NS Savannah that I mentioned earlier on, I mean, if you were to make the cruise ship completely nuclear powered, I mean, you could go around the world several times over on just a couple of kilograms of uranium-235. I mean, the reactors on board a modern nuclear submarine are tiny. They are tiny. And the amount of fuel they use, the uranium parts they use, probably a couple of kilos. Certainly not much. The reactors, apparently, what I've read up on lights and watched documentaries, are about the size of a dustbin. And typically they refuel a nuclear submarine every 4 or 5 years. I mean, the reactors on board the USS Nimitz will run for 25 years on a charge. Well, you've got a cruise ship, you put the reactor inside that. Well, the only trouble is when you need to refuel it, getting at the reactor is a little bit awkward. I mean, on a aircraft carrier, you've got the big flight deck hangar. It's just underneath that. Open up the flight deck and you time it with a refit. With a cruise ship, getting the reactor out, I mean, you got remove cabins, staterooms, and what have you. On the NS Savannah, it was just a hatch in front of the superstructure behind where the holes. You could open it up and reach down, pull the reactor out, put a new one in, take the reactor back to Westinghouse or your processing facility. They crack it open, take the old fuel out, put the new fuel in. When it's ready to go into another ship, and take it back to the next ship down the line. Or even if you've only got one ship in service, you open it up, take the reactor out, take it back to the builders. They recharge the nuclear reactor, but they leave all the control rods inside. Because typically the fuel handling facility will probably on at the same port that you are carrying out your refit. You carry the refit to the ship, put the reactor back inside, plug it in, off you go again. 25 years later, the ship's now 50 years old, getting on, getting tired. Take the reactor out, empty it out, send the spent fuel to be disposed of safely, and recycle the ship. Yeah, so there you are. Yeah, there's your nuclear fuel. The future of the world is going to be nuclear, whether we want it to be or not. I personally, I'm quite happy to have a nuclear, future. Will we ever see a nuclear-powered car? No. Nuclear-powered train? Not directly. Is it theoretically possible? Probably. You have a reactor to generate heat, which turns the turbine, generates electricity. Well, if you're going to put that, you better put batteries on it. Battery technology now, okay, we've got lithium, but who knows what else is around the corner? Because we've only got a finite supply of lithium. Got plenty of sodium. Whether sodium ion batteries will be any good, it's hard to say. But if you can find a way of having two reactive metals, use seawater as an electrolyte. Is it theoretically possible? I'm not sure. We go to Stavanger. 9 hours. We'll be there, and this trip will soon be in the bag. Cardiff to Stavanger. Right. Let's see where we are. Well, there we are. Doesn't echo real. Echoes nicely in the Iceland boat. We are 23 kilometres away from the end of the stream. But bear in mind, I started this stream and just gone 8:15. We've been going 2 hours. little bit driving all this stream. And I'm actually on this profile, I'm about to discover Stavanger. Feet ain't been here before. My other profiles have, now this profile has. Let's go to IKEA. Dock. Here we are. This is the outfield. This is where this is. This is it. This is IKEA in Stavanger. So we'll get this offloaded, and that will be it. Let's see how it wants to do. Yeah, stick in there. Got to obey site safety rules. Put on the high-vis jacket when they get outside the car, you know, all these kind of things. Now, this looks like it's got to be an interesting one to back into. Now, SCS, when they build these things, they put little hints and clues on how to get in there. Like, for example, there, there's like a little bit of a cutting. So get close as we can to this trailer. Lock it round. Mind you don't hit the bin there. Will this fit in there? Unfortunately, we haven't quite got enough room to spin it. So, back it a bit more, shall we? Get the truck roughly 90 degrees to the container. I can just about see the rear of the container. Full lock. Keep it as close as I can to there so as I don't catch the trailer with my tail. Stop there for a moment. Now basically I've got to go over one bay. back it up, run the edge of the truck alongside these stillages. Steer it out there. Now if I go straight back, I'll miss that trailer there. So begin to steer about now. Throw the lock on. Now, although it's accepted it, it's not quite how I want it to go, because you wouldn't actually be able to get it onto the door at that position. So, pull forwards. And that is that. I'll just deliver the job, sign it up. That's 1,942 driven kilometres. Taking me halfway up to level 38. Lovely. Right, all being well, I will see you guys next weekend for a nice another Saturday stream for trucking to our time. It'll be Easter, and we'll be certainly close to the 26th, which is Chernobyl Day. But we don't really want to dwell on that because it was a bad situation in our time. Made quite a lot of mess. You know, we've also got the 40 years ago at this moment in time, we had the Falklands conflict raging away, where British forces were in combat with Argentinian forces trying to shove them off our islands, which we did. So it's been quite an interesting time. I'll also try and find out what else is suitable for April. But for now, thank you for traveling with us, and I can end it at that. So everybody, if you like what you see, hit the like, hit the share, and hit the subscribe. Yeah, pray to God of like, share, and subscribe. And be safe, be well. Bye for now.